Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Showcase Virtual 2022. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and thank you for joining us. Now presenting at our event is Peter Londa. He's the president and CEO of Tantalus Systems. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is GRID on the TSX. Peter, take it away.
Robert, thanks for having us. And for those watching, thanks for joining our presentation today. As Robert mentioned, my name is Pete Londa. And I have the privilege of serving as CEO of Tantalus Systems, which is based just outside of Vancouver in British Columbia. As a public company, we'll share our forward-looking statement disclaimer and dive right in. So at the highest level, Tantalus is a high-tech company that is focused very specifically on a single purpose. And that purpose is to help build sustainable utilities for the future. And we'll talk more about that through the course of the presentation. But what we're attempting to do is leverage technology to digitize the distribution grid of electric utilities, as well as water and gas utilities, that to ultimately improve their reliability, improve the quality of power, water, and gas that's delivered, and most importantly, improve their visibility into what's unfolding so they can plan for the future. To that end, we support over 260 utilities today, predominantly in the United States, with some coverage in Canada and the Caribbean Basin. And we consistently add to our user community by winning about 20 new utilities each year. From the utilities that we support today, we gather 30 billion data points through our technology on consumption, power quality, and a variety of different critical metrics for the utility that's leading to a very robust offering around AI-enabled data analytics and enterprise software applications. Inherent in our solutions is an ESG component to help improve the environmental, social, and governance attributes of the utilities we support. Specifically, our technology is helping utilities reduce their carbon emissions or their greenhouse gas emissions. We believe that's going to be that much more increasingly important from a reporting perspective for utilities. And to that end, we delivered our inaugural ESG report earlier this calendar year and have committed to continue to update that report on an annualized basis. In terms of the growth trajectory of our business, while we have a very substantive business already, we are witnessing an increased level of activity as utilities truly try to digitize the delivery of electricity, water, and gas. We'll talk more about what that means, but you can think about turning the electric distribution grid into a digital network of connected devices, very much in alignment with the IoT or Internet of Things efforts for the utility. We also are witnessing significant growth in our solutions as a result of the preparation and planning that utilities are actively doing for the adoption of electric vehicles. While we could argue about the adoption rate of how quickly people will migrate from gas guzzlers to electric vehicles, and for that matter, the way in which that will happen, fundamentally, as electric vehicles show up in communities, be that residential, school buses, or commercial vehicles, it has a direct impact on the load profile that the utility has to deliver, and ultimately on the assets that the utility is managing to reliably deliver power to those vehicles. We also, through the data we capture, are very much focused on power quality analytics, and through those analytics, helping utilities predict where they have assets that are under duress, need to be upgraded, or ultimately need to be better maintained to mitigate disruptions from weather or disruptions from failing aging assets. In terms of our financial profile, very high level, we're trending to and have shared guidance for 2022. Our most recent Q3 results, we'll talk about that momentarily, but we are on a trajectory to deliver 20% growth or more this calendar year compared to last year. Embedded within our revenue profile is now over $9 million of US dollars of annualized recurring revenue. That number is growing at a compounded annual growth rate of 25% over the last 5 years. And we maintain very strong gross margins, despite the fact that our technology solution includes hardware, software, and services. So that's a very high-level summary of who we are and what we do and the attributes of the business. So now let's dive a little bit deeper to understand some other elements that are relevant. In terms of capitalization, we went public in 2021, trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange. You can see some of the statistics here that are also available on our website. From my perspective, we're trading at a substantial discount, not only to the comparables that our covering research analysts are applying towards our business, but just inherently the fundamental nature and scale of our revenue profile and the trajectory of our company. In terms of our leadership, we have several hundred years of utility experience, or more importantly, technology experience selling into the utility industry. At the board level, we are led by the former CEO of Hydro One, one of the largest utilities in North America, in Laura Formusa. She's been our chair now since 2017. The rest of our board includes independent directors that have experience in the utility industry, in the technology industry, and certainly in the capital markets industry. In terms of why we exist, in terms of our purpose that I had shared, and for those of you who may not be too familiar with what it actually takes to deliver electricity to your home or to your business, let's spend a few minutes on actually what the utilities are up against today and why we think the utilities we support are at a tipping point in terms of the infrastructure that they've relied on for years. At the highest level, a utility grid is made up of generation, transmission, and then distribution. From the left side of this slide, generation and transmission typically get a lot of attention, especially as extreme weather events unfold and impact ultimately the generation of power. We've seen that in Texas most recently, as an example, in 2021, when wind farms didn't operate the way that they were supposed to in cold weather. And even in this summer, extreme heat, wasn't enough wind, generation dropped. As power is generated from large generation entities and moved down the distribution network, right, there are calls to decarbonize not only everything, but certainly the utility industry. And so that puts significant stress on the grid itself, especially as we as individuals begin to electrify everything. And so if you can think about the grid itself, we're asking utilities to reduce their reliance on traditional fossil fuels like coal, while simultaneously increasing the amount of power that they need to deliver to power a transportation fleet. That's a serious challenge. And what we've seen is the vast majority of investment has typically been on the left side of this slide, generation and transmission. That comes at the cost of maintaining the distribution grid where we all live and work. And so what you're seeing highlighted in red is where Tantalus focuses its attention. And the reason why we think it creates such a compelling opportunity is because substations have devices called transformers. The average transformer is designed to operate for 30 years. The average life of transformers in the United States is approaching 50 years. So you have devices that have extended beyond what their original design life was and were never designed to support a two-way flow of energy from the edge of the grid. If we even take a step further back, our grid ties to the way Thomas Edison designed it over 100 years ago. Central source of generation, moving in one direction through substations, down through electric lines in our neighborhoods, and to the meters on the side of our home. Everything was one way. As we have rooftop solar, as we have power walls, as we have electric vehicles like the F-150 Lightning that's being advertised to discharge back into the home as a vehicle to grid strategy, that creates a two-way flow of electrons and a two-way flow of electricity from the very edge, the right-hand side of the slide, coming back into substations that in many circumstances are beyond their expected age. And so that creates a mountain of issues that utilities are facing, especially as we all expect them to reduce their carbon footprint while simultaneously being more reliable and producing more power for us. So how do we get involved? What do we actually do? And how are we providing a solution to the utility? We refer to that as digitizing the grid, and more specifically, the distribution grid. So to that end, what we've been doing now for several decades, over two, is helping utilities address the distribution grid of the utility industry. What we do is we deploy what we refer to as connected devices. Those devices are much like your iPhone, if you have an iPhone or an Android. And specifically, we build a distributed edge computing platform that if you were to break open your iPhone, you'd find a PCB board, a green board that's got computing power, microchips, RAM and flash memory, radio capability for communications. And we take that device and we turn that into a device that can, or a form factor that can fit into the meter on the side of your home or the meter on the side of the building where you may work. We also put that edge computing capability into other devices that utilities deploy, like load control switches or distribution automation equipment that sits between the substation and where we all live and work every day. And so as we get our edge computing, our distributed intelligence device, integrated into an increasing number of devices that utilities deploy, meters, load control switches, distribution automation equipment, other devices inside the substation, we layer on top of all of that a proprietary and very secure communications network. That communications network relies on a variety of different tools: fiber, cellular, radio frequency, WiMAX. And what we do is, for each utility, we look at their footprint, we look at what they are trying to accomplish, and we design a very secure and very reliable communications network that can ultimately maintain connectivity to the devices, our edge computing devices, that are deployed in the field. From there, we gather data, consumption data, power quality data, harmonics, wavelength, all good things for the utility. Ultimately, how does the utility track what changes we're making inside our home as it relates to the amount of power that we all need? So, as an example, we have someone that purchases or installs a new air conditioning unit at their home. That changes the amount of energy that the utility needs to prepare to deliver. And so the more visibility we can provide to the utilities on what's happening at the very edge of their grid, the better they can plan how much supply of electricity they need versus how much demand of electricity they deliver. And so we're trying to mitigate imbalances between supply and demand with data. That data is fed into our proprietary enterprise software applications, which are sold and deployed at the utility's head end and used from the general manager or CEO level all the way down through the organization. And on top of that software, enterprise software capability, is recently launched AI-enabled data analytics tools that focus on reliability and asset protection for the utility by triangulating and ultimately using machine learning data that we're pulling across the utility's footprint to better understand why changes are unfolding, what's causing those changes, and what does the utility need to do from a planning perspective to resolve problems before they have an outage, before a transformer explodes and causes a fire, before a tree branch hits a power line and creates a wildfire in the wilderness, or ultimately in communities that are really suffering from arid temperatures and water shortages that we consistently see now repeatedly on the West Coast. So everything that we do is from getting devices deployed in the field. Those deployed devices are typically deployed for, at a minimum, 15 years. Those devices then generate data. That data feeds into software. That software is enhanced through analytics. And we generate revenue from every step of that ultimate system architecture that's in front of you today. Where we get really excited and where we see a fundamental change, not only for the utility industry, but for also Tantalus. And we refer to that as going behind the meter. So if you think about your normal course today, you typically get a utility bill once a month. Some of it's automated now through email or through website, and you pay that bill. Utilities have always focused from their substations, their equipment in the field, to the meter, and focused on how much you've consumed and how much you need to pay. Well, as we think about the future, utilities can no longer stop at the meter. They have to have visibility into what's actually happening behind the meter. And so we refer to this as actually going behind the meter to gain visibility, and from visibility, command and control of devices and systems that are impacting the reliability of electricity. So if we look at the evolution of homes, whether it's a new designed, brand new built, or upgrades to an existing, right? We're seeing adoption of rooftop solar. Certainly some areas of the United States are moving faster than others, but nevertheless, an increasing number of states are providing incentives for homeowners or landlords or building managers to deploy rooftop solar to ultimately, right, reduce environmental impact and increase the amount of renewable energy that we all have access to. In addition to that, we're seeing people really begin and adopt EV, electric vehicles, and charging infrastructure at their home. And this isn't about Tesla anymore, but as Ford, as GM, as Volkswagen, as Volvo, as Toyota, all commit to delivering and transitioning their fleets to electric vehicles, the number of electric vehicles at different price points will increase, in our opinion, the adoption rate that we see. So that's going to unfold, right? Again, changing load profile and impact at the home. We're also seeing Generac and Tesla and other organizations focus on power walls, battery or other means, right, as a means of storing power at the home, either from rooftop solar panels or even potentially from a vehicle. We also have seen, right, wide adoption of Nest thermostats, Ecobee, Honeywell, right? You could name a list, Philips lighting systems, all of these systems designed to reduce the amount of power that we all consume every day. Well, while we're making those investments and we're ultimately committing to improve the reliability and efficiencies of our own homes, all of these devices ultimately create data. For years, utilities have tried to coordinate with customers to access that data by being granted access to a homeowner's Wi-Fi system. That's not all that secure, and it's not all that reliable. And I'll personalize that for you. I've got a 13-year-old son who has figured out when his friends come over, if he can't remember what the Wi-Fi password is, he now knows how to reset the password on the router inside our home. We can argue about my parenting skills another time. But the point being is, then when I come home, if he's changed the password, my phone doesn't work on the Wi-Fi network. It's one thing for me to reach out to my son. I know exactly what's happened. Sorry, Dad. I get the updated password. I then have to go spend time on all of our Nest thermostats and other devices to update those and then try to implore to him not to do it again, right? But from a utility perspective, they have no visibility into that. Yet there are many utilities today that are trying to roll out a bring your own thermostat program or a bring your own EV charging program. So in response to members of our user community, our utility customers, we've been working on a next generation offering, and we refer to this as our TrueSense Gateway. The TrueSense Gateway is a device that will sit between an electric meter and the meter socket on the side of the home. You're seeing this here. I'll circle it with the mouse crudely on this presentation. But this is a device that not only supports all of the meter data back to the utility, but we've brought a first of its kind to the market to install a Wi-Fi chip and something called Home Plug, which is power line communications capability, to allow a utility to have their own network that runs into the home to communicate with other IP addressable devices. Now, keep in mind, the utility will ultimately still need to have a relationship and a transaction with their customers through incentives, time of use rates, or other programs that they can roll out. But once we as consumers partner with our utilities to ultimately improve the reliability for our own home and our communities, and also potentially increase the investment that we're making in our home with reduced electric power rates, a utility can then directly connect from its meter socket to an EV charger, to a smart inverter for rooftop solar or Powerwall, to potentially a Nest thermostat or a hot water heater. This is revolutionary for utilities, and most importantly, it eliminates the homeowner Wi-Fi and provides not only a reliable signal into the home, but with our software capabilities through an acquisition that we've recently announced of a business in California, an IEEE standards approach to cyber security for accessing device data from all these different devices owned by consumers or landlords, and to bring that data through one communications network to the utility, and ultimately bringing that data all the way through their firewall and into our enterprise software applications and our data analytics. By delivering the TrueSense Gateway, which is currently in alpha tests right now with utilities, we think we've got an opportunity to truly transform the utilities, to get behind the meter for the first time and have broader visibility and command and control. This device ultimately supports the convergence of not only next generation metering, but also grid optimization, meaning power quality. What's the impact of a rooftop solar panel on the reliability of the grid? It supports utilities that actually want to step into the void in communities where Comcast, Cablevision, or other large cable providers aren't existing and delivering broadband access to communities. And surprisingly, about 20% of the US, maybe a little less, 18% of the US today don't have affordable access to broadband in their homes, right? I take it for granted today living on the East Coast of the US. But there's a lot of United States, Canada, and the Caribbean Basin where that doesn't happen. And so the utilities are stepping into the void. Our device can help support that initiative. Last but not least, it's the integration behind the meter of these distributed energy resources, which we believe are only going to increase. So what we like to say is one network, one device, multiple paths for the utility to prepare for the future and improve their ROIs as the world evolves, as consumers change, and as we ultimately consistently or continually adopt new technologies. To that end, by deploying our systems, both our existing capabilities and our new TrueSense Gateway, we're building the utility of the future. And from our perspective, this is no longer about just delivering power. The utility of the future needs to be a data company. And so we are educating the utilities we support on not only counting the kilowatts for purposes of generating a bill that we all pay today, but also count every corresponding kilobyte of data in terms of consumption and power quality, and use that data to improve the visibility and ultimately improve their command and control of the grid so that it's more reliable. While our financials are available through our public filings, and certainly our most recent quarterly financials are available on our website at a very high level to give you some perspective on scale. We generated over $27 million of revenue. We report in US dollars, even though we're up on the Toronto Stock Exchange. We generated over almost $27.5 million of revenue through the first 9 months of this year. And the guidance that we provided is to generate in excess of $38.5 million of revenue this year, representing 20% growth year over year. Of that revenue through the first 9 months, over $9 million in software and services, with gross profit margins approaching 50%. We've continued to make some investment in R&D, and through the acquisition have ultimately incurred some additional expenses on the software side of our business, and hence the increase in OpEx. We are running through a manageable amount of negative EBITDA today to support direct R&D investments. And as we see those R&D investments like the TrueSense Gateway materialize into revenue, we expect ultimately to generate positive EBITDA in the 2023 timeframe. In terms of our ARR, we're growing at roughly 20% since 2016 and continuing to invest in that area. With that, we think that this creates a compelling investment thesis for investors, particularly given where our stock is trading today relative to comps that our analysts coverage. There's a massive opportunity that we are pursuing. We have differentiated technology with new capabilities that have first mover advantage. We've got a pretty strong base and a very strong balance sheet to support our ongoing operations and the investments that we're making. And we fortunately benefit from having a very experienced team to execute on our plan. So with that, I appreciate you spending a few minutes to learn about our business. And Robert, I'd open up for Q&A.
Very good. Thank you, Peter. So we're running right up against time here. So I got time for one question. It's the question that I'm asking every company here that's presenting at the event. You know, we're going through tough markets right now. You know, what measures is Tantalus taking to manage some of the macroeconomic pressures that are currently affecting most microcap companies across the board?
Yeah, so we have hardware in our business. We've got contract manufacturers for sure. So, but we've been weathering the storm on most recently inflation. We've done a couple of things on as it relates to inflation. We've fortunately been able to initiate without too much issue price increases, and we've also been able to curtail some expenses on our side and get smarter about how we build our devices. So our gross profit margin has actually increased over the last year or two, despite inflationary pressures. As it relates to supply chain constraints that we continue to witness on electronic components, you know, we've got a team that's been in place for an extended period of time with our contract manufacturers that are mitigating changes in lead times that really are outside of our control. And so that's why we had a dip in revenue last year, you know, but are in a good position as lead times have extended. We've been able to absorb and plan accordingly. You know, last but not least, I'd say, as it relates to sort of weather and extreme events that unfortunately continue to unfold and are very disruptive, as we just saw, you know, in the state of Florida, both West Coast and East Coast getting hit in this hurricane season in the past several weeks. And when those events happen, they have dramatic impact on communities. It ultimately forces utilities to upgrade systems and, most importantly, build more resilient grids. And to that end, the current administration in Washington, D.C. has not only made commitments around decarbonizing, but has also prioritized the resiliency of the grid in the face of extreme weather. This isn't about climate change. This is about the fact that, right, we see an increasing number of storms that have catastrophic impact from an economic perspective and from a life perspective. And so there is massive stimulus dollars that are flowing into the utility sector, fortunately, a lot of which ties to our technology. So, you know, the political turmoil is what it is, but there is a consistent theme and I think dollars to solve the problem around decarbonization, extreme weather events, and electrification. And certainly on specific to Tantalus, inflation and supply chain constraints are two things that I think we've been able to navigate. And you'll see that through strong gross margins and, frankly, revenue growth.
Very good. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your presentation today. We really do appreciate it. For everyone that is watching and participating, thank you, and have a great rest of your event. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. Thanks for the time.